What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you like this video. This is your review for Ultimate Girls Trip Season 3, Episode 3. Child, look, we are still down to Candace's little party that ain't nobody really feeling. Leia talking about some she bored because Alexia is telling the story about her ex-husband was caught with a man. And, you know, she telling the story, and Alea's like, I know this story, it's boring. Can we talk about something else? Oh my gosh, can you guys just get drunk or something so that I can be entertained? First of all, me getting drunk is not here for your entertainment. Just because you can't partake because of your situation, which I respect. But that doesn't mean that I'm a dancing monkey performing for you. Oh, I'm going to go get drunk to make you laugh. Like, no. And then, of course, you know, everybody got upset with her. You know, Marisol was like, what are you talking about? This is a great story. Because, of course, Alexia, her ride or die, you know. And, you know, Giselle was like, what are you talking about? Like, I haven't heard the story. I want to hear it. And Leia was like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, whatever. Like, I'm, you know. And so, I knew that was going to be a problem because the rest of the girls were like, that's rude. Why are you going to say, like, Alexia is literally telling us a story that affected her life. Like, not only is this her ex-husband who died, but he died and she found out that, you know, well, she knew. I ain't gonna say she found out because if I knew, you knew. But anyway, you know, but it's like a whole situation. So, of course, everybody is mad at Leia. Her and Candace get up and go to the bathroom. Child, Candace changes her clothes and she ends up performing and doing like a whole performance of Drive Back. I believe it was Drive Back, child. And of course, everybody pretended like it was such a great performance and everything was cool. And don't get me wrong, like Candace is Candace. Candace can sing. It is what it is. But girl, okay, child. All right. Okay, I'm just trying to go through my notes, child. So on the ride back, of course, Giselle and Portia are talking about how the party wasn't all that and how Candace was being so shady and coming for them, and they basically, Candace went through all of this just to shade her and Giselle, and how, you know, Portia was like, I'm flattered that, you know, you went through all that just to shade me. Like, I'm absolutely flattered. And I could see where she coming from with that, because I was like, now, Candace, that was a little weak. That was a little weak, Candace, okay? And then later on, Candace, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out here. Later on, Candace is going to talk about how she's got anxiety and how she's so full of anxiety coming halfway around the world by herself. And Portia was like, but you had the shadiest game. Like, you were shady. Like, you were picking and creating problems where there were none for somebody who was so anxious about being on this trip. And I was like, you know what? She does have a valid point, Candace. But, okay, we'll come back to that, child. The girls are feeling like Leia doesn't really want to be there, and so they're kind of like, if she don't want to be here, then she can leave. Like, if she don't want to be here, she can go. Y'all, now, again, y'all know how this stuff starts and how these narratives get going. So, you know, they're going to give it to Leia the next day, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So, the next day, Alexia is hosting a yacht trip, and she's got, like, all the little Cuban, she has Cuban food, and everybody has a mojito when they get on the boat, and, you know, all that good stuff. Now, Candace got this big ass hat that I'm with Portia. How the hell did she get on the butt? I mean, get in her luggage. Like, you clearly must have rolled that up into something and stuffed it somewhere. Cause, child, I don't know how you got, but it was. I mean, when I say a big old hat, I'm not exaggerating. It was huge. Like, the brim was way out to here. Like, it was ridiculous. But it was so Candace. Like, it was ridiculous, but it was so Candace all at the same time. They get to the boat. They still getting on Leia about her boring comment about her wanting to go home. And she was like, you know what? I did say I wanted to go home. Like, I did feel like I wanted to go home. Then her and Marisol get into it because Marisol texted her before they came on the trip. They got to talking. And Marisol texted her and was like, oh my gosh, it's such a shame that you're not drinking anymore. You know, I would love to get drunk with you or something to that effect. And I'm like, what is up with y'all trying to peer pressure this girl into relapsing? Like, Leia is not my favorite person on this show at this point. And I could definitely see that she's a whole Karen and that she's got a whole lot of other situation. But I think it is so messed up that her sobriety and people trying to get her to lose her sobriety is an issue. Like, first we had Heather, and y'all beat Heather up about it, and then we come to find out Marisol sent her a text basically saying the same thing, and then later on we found out that Heather was like, yeah, well, you know, I have friends who are sober, and if they ask me to give them a drink, I bring them a drink. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you, Heather? And Heather was like, yeah, I mean, you know, if that, you know, I have a friend, if they wanted, you know, if they wanted to not be here anymore, I would be like, well, what's Dr. Kevorkian's phone number? I'll set it up. Heather, what is wrong with you? And then so Candace was like, are you serious? She was like, so you basically do whatever your friends want you to do, even if it's to their own detriment. And she was like, duh, clearly. And then, of course, you know, we're talking about, you know, we think back on Jen Shaw, and Candace was like, touche. And I was like, that was funny, because, yeah, when you put it like that, I guess, Heather, yeah, you practice what you preach, because you're absolutely correct. So, everybody is kind of jumping on Leia, and it's a pile on her, but of course, that's exactly what we would expect. And Leia ends up, like, walking off, and then she gonna tell the child, I don't even want to get into that she blamed everybody for coming on her cycle, child. That's when Candace told the ladies that, you know, she was like, I understand where Leia's coming from, because, you know, I have anxiety too. I've called my mother every day that we've been here, and, you know, mind you, they're only on day 3, but okay, girl. And then that's when they brought up the fact that she indulged in these shady ass games, but yet it's still, and Candace was like, well, did that make you uncomfortable? And Portia was like, it did make me uncomfortable. And Giselle was like, it made me uncomfortable too. Now, I'm going to be honest. I could see, because they were the only two that really did have shady names. I feel like if Candace really had been shady with everybody else, it may not have been so bad. But the fact that everybody else's name was kind of like a Kiki, you really were coming for them. Now, Giselle, I 100% understand. But Portia, okay, girl. Even though Portia took Monique's side, which is probably the only reason why Candace got any beef with Portia, it's because Portia took Monique's side in the whole fight, child. Anyway. They had a game where they did the Spanish sayings, which was cute again. It was cute. It kind of brought everybody back together. Baby, and then we got on this Heather and Whitney situation, because they said that Heather and Whitney agreed to be cool. They pinky swear that they wouldn't fight anymore on the trip. So here go Leia being shady. And I ain't even mad at you at this point, Leia, because they was coming at you earlier. Well, Whitney, then why were you talking about Heather? Like, didn't you say something about Heather and the Mormon church and her name being on some roll or something? Well, come to find out, you know, with the Mormon church, you put your name on the roll. And when you leave the Mormon church, there's like this whole process that you have to go through to leave the Mormon church. We saw on last season that Whitney has done that, whereas Heather has not. But Heather was like, wait a minute, Whitney, like, are you serious right now? Like, you of all people know exactly what I've gone through with the Mormon church, and how much I've gone through. She said the reason why I haven't actually gone in and started this process or finished the process is because it's just so final. It is so, like, you know, my family and everything else. And she said, you know, but you know that right now that, like, the Mormon church is actually suing me. Like, I am going through stuff with the Mormon church because of my book, because of things that I've done and said. So for you to throw that back at me, like, that's really messed up. And Heather is pissed. Like, Heather is really, really upset by it, which I can understand, because she was like, wait a minute, you of all people know how serious this is and how bad this is. So then Candace was like, well, I understand, you know, people who, you know, throw things out there just to create a story for themselves, because Giselle said about my husband. Now, we just went through Potomac, child. I ain't about to rehash all of that. But for those of you who don't look at the Real Housewives of Potomac, Giselle alleged that Candace's husband made her feel uncomfortable because he asked to speak to her privately, and they went into her hotel room, and she thought that her hair and makeup was in the room, but they weren't, and it made her uncomfortable that she was in a hotel room by herself with them. Now, later on in the show, other people came on and said that he was flirting with him and he was doing all these other things. They tried to put 20 on 10, right? Now let me put a pin in that right now, and let me explain this to some people. And shout out to, I think it was Color Me Pink, right? Who brought this up. When I looked at her review of the first episode, I think we have to put this into context of when this was filmed. So this was filmed at the conclusion of filming for the Real Housewives of Potomac. But this was before they saw the season, right? So Candace knew what happened in real time. So she knew what Giselle had said about Chris making her uncomfortable and all of that. What she didn't see were the other conversations that Giselle had when Giselle said that he's a creeper and he's this and he's that. She didn't see everybody's confessional. She didn't see... So, they certainly hadn't had that reunion yet. So, when Candace was filming the Ultimate Girls Trip, was she upset with Giselle? Yes. But would this be the same Candace-Giselle dynamic if they were to film it now? Absolutely not. And I think we have to put all of that into perspective. It's the same thing with Heather and Whitney. They had just got done... Their season had just got done, and she said, we haven't had a reunion. We haven't had a chance to talk about anything. And so, again, Whitney and Heather are still very raw in what happened during their season, and Giselle and Candace are still very raw in their season. Even though Candace's thing was, I know what Giselle did. She didn't know how deep it went. So I think we have to put that into perspective. And of course, Giselle was like, Candace, you're not going to tell a lie on me. That's not what I did. Don't try to do that. Don't try to do that. So somehow or another, child, we got from that to Heather and the eye and her black eye from her season. And again, we didn't get to the reunion where Heather came up with all these alternative facts about what happened to her eye. All they know is they went to sleep one night, woke up the next day, Heather had a black eye. Whitney is trying to convince everybody that Jen did it. Whitney is trying to convince everybody that Jen beat Heather up, and Heather is just too scared to say what happened. And, of course, it started working. I think it started working until Whitney kept talking. And Whitney said, well, you know, we had the Marilyn Monroe party, and everybody was drunk, and the ladies were running around the house, and we were all drunk, and I went to sleep in my room, and the next morning, Heather had this black eye. And Portia was like, okay, so wait a minute. She said, girl, that's what... So everybody was running around drunk. Girl, like... Portia was like, shit, anything can happen when you add a little alcohol to the mix, because we know the Real Housewives of Atlanta done had some situations with alcohol. Bolo, anyone? So she was like, girl, you are really trying to make it that Jen hit Heather, and that Heather is covering up. And, you know, y'all know how Whitney get in her head, and she make up in her mind what it is. And Heather was like, look, I don't know what happened, and you're not going to make me say what happened. Like, that's it, that's all. Now, at the end of the day, I believe Heather knows exactly what happened. And it may very well have been Jen Shaw. But Heather ain't saying it. Heather ain't talking, and you can't make that assumption. Like, you can't just jump to that conclusion and be like, Heather did it. I mean, Jen did it if Heather's not saying it. And so, I feel like the rest of the girls were kind of side-eyeing Whitney by this point. Like, okay, you're going to just, you know, you're going to put all of this on Heather and make it to be something that Heather is saying that it's not, right? And then that was pretty much the end of the episode, child. They went back to the house. Everybody was tired. Heather ain't talking to Whitney again. They right back where they started. Portia and Giselle end up having a shot with Pepsi at the end of the night, and they are like, woo, child. So anyway, it's day 3, child. We going into episode number 4. And I will talk to y'all later. Peace.